Parshas Toldos. This week's Parsha discusses, among other things, the contention between Yitzchak and Avimelech and Avimelech's people. We're looking at Perek Chavav, starting with Pasuk Yud Gimel, going through Pasuk Tezayin, that is 26, 13 through 16. So the verses read as follows. Vayigdal ha'ish, this is talking about Yitzchak Avinu, Isaac. The man became great. Vayelech v'haloch v'gadel ad ki gadol ma'od. And he was increasingly great, exceedingly prosperous. Now Yudal, this is 14. Vayhilo miknei tzon u'miknei bakar v'avodora ba. He had possessions of sheep, possessions of cattle, much farmland. Vayikanu oso plishtim. The plishtim, the Philistines, were envious of Yitzchak because of his success. So what did they do? So first of all, they tried to take him down. And all the wells that his father's servants, that his father was Abraham, had dug in the days of Avram, his father. So the Philistines stopped them up and filled them with earth. They sabotaged the wells. And now the final verse we'll be discussing is Tezayin, that's 16. Vayomer Avimelech el Yitzchak, and Avimelech says to Yitzchak, Lech me'imanu, go away from us. Why? Because you become more powerful than us. So we see that Yitzchak's success is the source of enmity towards Yitzchak, envy, and an adversarial relationship between Yitzchak and the other citizens of the area. Envy is one of the historical causes that some scholars attribute to the phenomenon of anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism is a very perplexing phenomenon, sometimes called the world's oldest hatred, and sometimes it's explained as a matter of envy. Now, that envy can be because of material success, but the Jews weren't always materially successful. It can also be as a result of spiritual or communal success. Whatever the envy is, envy is a feeling of resentment against somebody who has something you don't have. So there are different ways of responding to envy. The Torah says in Kriyat Shema, it says, you will love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your might. We talked about a more precise translation of those words, but for the purposes of this examination, Rashi comments, with your two inclinations. The word levavcha which means your heart, could have been libecha, like chazak va'ametz libecha, strengthen your heart, be strong and strengthen your heart. And that's libecha with one letter base. Levavcha, say Chazal, alludes to two motivating forces. There's the positive and the negative. We usually refer to it as the Yetzer HaTov, the Yetzer Hara, the positive inclination and the negative inclination, or the evil inclination. How do you serve God with your evil inclination? So Chazal say, Kinasofrim Tar B'Chochma, that a jealousy among scholars will increase wisdom. So that's one way to channel jealousy, which would be in a positive way, which is I see what somebody else has, and not that I want to deprive him of that, but I am motivated to succeed just like he succeeded, or maybe even to exceed his success. If he's accomplishing, I want to accomplish more. If he's learning, I want to learn more. If he's learning Daf Yomi, I want to learn more than Daf Yomi, or at least learn Daf Yomi. So the notion that somebody else's success can spur you on to accomplishment is something which is not considered to be a bad thing. And if it's channeled towards service of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, of the Almighty, it's considered to be a good thing, even though it stems from comparing yourself to your neighbor. Then there's a much more insidious and destructive type of envy. And that's the envy that we see here, which is that the Plishtim, the Philistines, couldn't tolerate the fact that there was somebody who was a foreigner who was more successful than they were. Yitzchak was more successful than they were. And so what did they do? They stopped up his wells. They filled them with earth. They didn't want him to succeed. It's not that they took the water for themselves. They didn't need the water, but they didn't want Yitzchak to have the water. And it's so much so that at some point, Avimelech says, you got to get out of here. Now, some say that he was actually being gentle with Yitzchak, and he was saying, just leave the place, the seat of the kingdom, because it really doesn't look good for somebody other than the king to have as much wealth as you have. So go out to the more remote regions. Others are not quite so charitable about Avimelech, and they say this represents, simply put, expulsion. We don't like the fact that the Jews are successful, so we want to kick them out. And there are countless countries in our history from which the Jews have been expelled, most notoriously Spain, but it happened in Spain, it happened in Portugal, it happened in England, it happened in many, many places in which the Jews were kicked out. According to this reading, they were kicked out because the residents of the citizens of the countries in which the Jews lived were simply envious of the accomplishments of the Jews. Shamshon Refoel Hirsch has a striking understanding of the utility of this envy. And it's preceded by a notion that there are three stages in the Jewish development. There's the stage of servitude, there's the stage of independence but subject to envy, and then there's the stage of independence, spiritual accomplishment, and a light into the nations, and the recognition of Nasi Elokim Atah B'Kirbeinu, you are a prince of God. The first stage of servitude and subservience is represented by the bris of Yaakov. The second is the bris of Yitzchak, which is independent but subject to the enmity and the envy of others. Not everybody necessarily, but a substantial number. And then there's the final stage, which is the ultimate stage of redemption, which is where the descendant of Abraham, the Jew, finally achieves status as a Nasi Elokim, a prince of God, and can fulfill his proper role as a spiritual leader. Rav Hirsch says that were it not for the envy of the Philistines, Yitzchak could have easily become preoccupied with the management of his great wealth. And the prominent position that comes with the management of great wealth, and all of the adding a little bit of texture here, all of the intrigue and all of the maneuvering that comes about with great wealth. And this would be a preoccupation unworthy of Abraham's son. And the kina, the envy, says Rav Hirsch, has always brought the Jew back to his essential self. The kina, the envy of others around the Jews, are, in a sense, what keeps the Jews on mission, keeps them tracking towards their goal as ambassadors of God on this earth. And so Rav Hirsch says that the kina, this envy, is one of the keys to our survival. He says it accompanies our prosperity so as to neutralize the tempting distractions of prosperity and to warn us again and again of our essential Jewish calling. This is a challenge. Sometimes it's a bitter pill to swallow because this envy leads to what we call anti-Semitism. And Rav Hirsch says that anti-Semitism keeps us on track. We don't welcome it. We don't want it. We don't desire it. And if we ultimately act in a way that's consistent with our mission, we will be free of it and ultimately lead to the Abrahamic stage of our development, and that is to be freed of the envy and to be spiritual leaders. And for that, we need to get back to the business of being good Jews, good people, doing what we're supposed to do, and ultimately lead to our redemption. We pray for that redemption every day. Have a good Shabbos.